Howdy, this is Lemmy with RevZilla. I'm joined once again by my compadres and gas holes, Joe Zito and Spurgeon. We're going to give you a completely incomplete analysis on something I think that is highly controversial, cruisers, cruiser-style motorcycles. I think we probably all fall sort of all over the range as far as, wow, you're just leading with that, huh? We fall all over the range here, so whether you
I just gave the ending away.
Whether you love these things or you hate these, I have a feeling you're probably going to hear some things you agree with here, and maybe some things that you don't, and maybe some things that might change your mind. I say we kick things off. First thing I want to talk about personally is that, I think cruisers are constantly maligned because of their perceived lack of performance, but I think really this boils down to exactly how you define performance. If you define performance as, getting down the drag strip at a certain amount of time, or taking a corner at some crazy lean angle, then yeah, there are some cruisers, most of them, that will probably disappoint you greatly.
I want to back up because, when I say hate cruisers, I don't hate cruisers. I think they have a time and a place.
Wait. You just said you hate cruisers.
And again, I said joking aside. I was joking. I was trying to be lighthearted with this. But at one point in time, the cruiser was the bike that you used. I mean, you packed everything on it. You could take it anywhere. It was hauling anything you needed to haul.
The cruiser was the original standard.
But it's not like that anymore. And we're now in 2019, and there's just better options out there that still give you performance from
I think that you guys are kind of missing the point of performance of a cruiser.
It's the first time Joe has ever cut me off.
I think what you're looking at a cruiser as a more utilitarian thing, or a touring bike or whatever, but performance in a cruiser is how it looks, how it sounds, how it sits, the stance.
How does it make you feel? Right. What is the emotional performance of this motorcycle?
It's really hard to have like a benchmark of performance so unmeasurable. So if you're looking at, like you said, quarter-mile times, or how fast you can get around a track, like, you're totally missing the point.
Yep.
It's really about how it makes you feel at the end of the day.
So what about performance from a comfort standpoint, from an ergonomic standpoint? So here's one of the things that's always griped me. When you look at performance from comfort, everybody assumes that cruisers are these big, comfortable machines you can tackle long miles down the highway. There is nothing more uncomfortable that this to me is like.
Spurt, that's the Freedom Star.
No, this is ridiculous.
It's getting weird.
But so just let me finish, because even the bikes that I've ridden have mids.
Don't let him finish.
Stop. Yeah, you're the one I'm worried about now. So even the bikes that have mid controls, when I'm sitting in a nice upright position, the Street Glide is a perfect example. Within 80 miles, my tailbone feels like it's just been beat to hell. My lower back is sore. When you and I took that trip out to Ohio and we swapped and I was on the Indian Scout, how long did I last? 15, 20 minutes on the Scout before I was like, I can't do this.
I think it's not fair to measure a cruiser strictly on how far you could go in a day on it, because a lot of cruisers are just meant to jam down to the bar on Sunday, or go cruise around with your club or whatever, or do a toy run or something like that. I don't think that all cruisers are designed to go 400 or 500 miles a day.
I think you could make the exact same argument with a sport bike. I don't know about you, buddy, but I don't.
No thanks.
Well, I wasn't very comfortable on that Scout on that 800-mile ride we took.
That's the other
I don't think I'd
extreme.
want to be on an R6 either.
I could do the R6 for longer distance than I could with that Indian Scout.
But everybody's different, bud. That's the thing, is what you're comfortable on might not be what everybody else is comfortable on. For instance,
I agree that.
For instance, you want to talk about ergonomics, that's wonderful. Your bikes, they make me laugh. That huge KTM you have, I don't want to ride that thing.
It's so big and comfortable.
Exactly. The seat is only 4 inches higher than my crotch naturally is at ground level.
You need longer legs.
He's 4 inches taller standing next to you.
But I'm not even that short. I'm 6 foot with a 32-inch inseam.
You're 5'11 3/4. You're just giving yourself that extra quarter of an
feel like
inch.
we're picking fly out of pepper right now. But there's plenty of people who ride motorcycles shorter than me. I mean, if you're 5'3", 5'4", 5'5", these are real sizes that people come in. Do you expect them to jump on an adventure
how tall
bike?
Are you? You're shorter. You're 5'8". He's shorter. He's 4 inches shorter than both. Well, you're 7 inches shorter than me. How hard is it for you to ride your Tiger around?
It's not hard, but I think that maybe what he's getting at is, as far as someone getting into motorcycling, it's way more intimidating to look at a big adventure bike or a sport touring bike or even a sport bike where the seat height is 34 inches or something like that.
Yes.
Versus something like this that has forwards where the seat's low, or a Savage.
Like
or
you
a Rebel
referenced
or
our Harley phone over there.
Yes, but take that a step further. So, especially for beginning or newer riders, but there are riders who've been in the game for a long time who might not be super strong riders, or they might just be very conservative and like to put their feet down when they hit a stop. And
there's plenty of bikes out there that I think give a more comfortable ergonomic experience, like just on a nice upright experience, whether it's a Triumph, Street Twin or it's a Ninja 400. There's low seat heights, nice upright seating position that's comfortable.
Depending on the cruiser, cruisers have the lowest seat heights of all the bikes. There's no two ways about that.
I'm not going to argue that. I can't. But I don't. But how low do you need?
You're
to
a giant beast who's uncomfortable on cruiser bikes because the seat's too low and the pegs are too forward, and you dig it.
So maybe I'm just too tall for it.
No. So
I think we're beating ergos to death.
To some degree.
The other thing that like we were talking about performance earlier, is something that really I dig about cruisers is the fact that just purely the layout of the motorcycle gives the engineers and designers all kinds of freedom as far as what the engines are like.
Yes.
Maybe I think a lot of folks, as soon as they think of a cruiser, they think of a V-twin and traditional, maybe soft tail looking bike. But I mean, think about a Rebel, it's a single, or you have a Triumph Rocket 3.
The Triumph Rocket 3 engine is the same engine that's in my Mazda 3 hatchback. It's a 2.3 liter.
Oh,
now, mine's a 4-cylinder, but I mean the Rocket 3 is
a Rocket?
Yes,
dude, it's the most insane thing I've ever experienced.
Not only does it have so much freaking torque, it wants to rip your neck off, but it kind of twists.
Look at that smile on his face.
Yeah,
No. But
I
the
said
ergonomics
I don't
suck.
hate cruisers.
No.
I backed up from the beginning and I said, listen, I don't hate them.
But you're going to be held to the first thing you said. Literally, you interrupted to say, I hate cruisers.
But look at how many cruisers like that.
It's the primary recency effect. As
We're
long as I end this video by saying, you know what, they're not that bad. Y'all changed my mind a little bit. But no, the Rocket 3, you pull back on that thing, and first of all, the engine kind of twists a little bit, and the chassis get that like BMW kind of boxer effect.
Can you do it again?
Like this?
You're going to do that at the club.
That's the way I
Next time you
dance.
guys are at the club.
You guys should see me at a wedding. This is exactly how I do it.
You're rolling the dice too much.
Think about it. How many cruisers are out there that are putting out over 150 horse now and 150 foot-pounds of torque? That's bananas on
the Diavel. I mean, that's a pretty nutty one. Those things are insane.
I think from Joe's point, I think one of the things that I think is cool about that is that I don't think there's any other platform. I was trying to do the math on this last night, right? I was trying to think about sport bikes. Okay, well, how many engine configurations do you normally see? Really, it's inline fours, triples, and V-twins. There's not really any pure sport bikes that I know of that are using P-twins or singles, unless you get into some like those one-off race bikes. But I think really, even adventure bikes, triples, twins, cruisers lead the pack as far as freedom for engine design. I think that's really cool.
The other thing to think.
So I'll give it to you for that.
For me, it's the fact that it's kind of that show and go factor. Something that can perform, but looks good doing it. You know what I mean? So you can look at a cruiser's engine and tell, oh, well, that's where the cams are. That's where the push rods are.
Oh, you're talking about just being able to see the engine in the bike.
Yeah, it's not hidden in fairings, and it's designed to be looked at. It's designed to be a part of the overall aesthetic of the bike versus it just being a boiler room, you know what I mean? That's hidden behind closed doors.
So you're hitting. There's a couple interesting things that I want to touch on. So you guys both talked about the freedom of design, and I agree. You'll probably find the widest spread of engine layouts in a cruiser, but what you'll also find too is generally the widest spread of displacements, because cruisers are never competition machines. They're almost never limited to any type of displacement.
You never heard of the Cruiser Cup?
The whole Cruiser Cup. So you can find them usually in a pretty wide variety of displacements as well as power levels, as you had said as well, which I think is kind of an important point.
You look at the old Ducati 900 SS, and now all that is hidden behind fairings, man. I mean, even the carburetors on those bikes were just so cool to stare at. I think a lot of it,
unfortunately, has to do with liquid cooling. I mean, an air-cooled engine always looks better than a liquid-cooled engine. So it's
yeah, but most of the cruisers are liquid cooled. I mean, we've gotten so far away from air-cooled.
Anyway, but I think that was kind of the birth of the let's hide this ugly heap of metal.
Well, what you're talking about, if you think about it, also this comes back to performance. In terms of visual performance, you're saying that cruisers perform differently than a more a different style bike.
We're getting a lot of leeway out of this performance term. It's a visual performance. You just look at it, and it performs better for your eyeball.
I mean, ultimately, what it really boils down to is what does the bike do for you? Because really, it matters how does this thing make you feel?
So is that your definition of performance for this? What the bike does for you?
I would say the most important characteristic for any motorcycle is emotional performance. How does it make the person with the money to buy it
Emotional
feel?
performance. That sounds like a Rolling Stones album from the 80s.
But if all this other
Have you heard the new emotional performance single? Oh my God, they're killing it.
all the other stuff we're talking about, though, if it was just about how the spec sheet looked, then there'd only be one bike. Every year there'd be one bike that won every single shootout because that was the best performer. But the reality is, you can define this in a lot of different ways. A good one would be you love adventure bikes.
I do.
Adventure or dual sport, which is better? Well, what are you going to do? It's there's not one that's better or the other. Do you want lightweight or do you want more power? Like it's just a question of that. One of the other interesting things I wanted to touch on for just a moment about engines. You have the Harley Davidson, right? And it just kind of plodded along, whatever, after Indian sort of went away. And they just kept making the same bike. They improved it, little bit by bit, year over year. And there really was no natural.
You mean like every 10 years or so, maybe 15.
They made year by year improvement. In all seriousness, they made year by year, nothing drastic though, to your point. But they had no real natural competitors in the market, right? Until the British came, and then it seemed like they were maybe eating a little bit of their lunch. And then we saw the Japanese get here with the CB750 especially. I mean, they kind of came in with these little bikes that were stealing some of the market, but I think Harley felt insulated against, the bigger bikes. I think they thought they were the king of the big bikes until the CB750 showed up. Right, and whooped the shit out of everything. 50th annivery this year, by the way.
But that goes back to your original point of performance.
But hang on. so now from 1969, these things, they're making these killer bikes. What's the first Japanese V-twin cruiser style bike?
The Virago?
1981. Yeah. So, for better than 10 years, you had the Japanese manufacturers in America selling bikes that sold on performance. They're a little bit cheaper than the American option, and these things actually hauled the mail. Great. So now we go to 1981. I think if at that point you were still a Harley customer, you were a Harley customer. You wanted a Harley for whatever reason, whether you liked where it was made, you liked the way it was made, you thought that was the real deal. Pick your reason. Heritage. Which there is a little, which can't be completely downplayed. We're making fun of it, but like that actually is important. That's why I have old bikes. That's why you have old bikes. But the customer who's buying a Japanese bike at this point was someone who wanted, to your saying, a more classical definition of performance. I wanted to go fast, I wanted to corner. Well, now, all of a sudden, in 1981, Yamaha rolls this thing out, and despite the fact that it was a technological tour de force, and Honda went even crazier, and there were some pretty nutty cruisers through the 80s. I think most of the Harley folks looked at that and they were like, well, I don't want that. That's not a Harley at all. But I think you had most of the people who rode a Japanese bike kind of saying, well, wait a minute, you guys were doing so well there, and now you took a couple steps back.
But think about it. Think about what was going on with Harleys during that era. I mean, AMF took over in '69.
Yep.
So from that point forward, even though we owe Harley's success to AMF taking over during that time, but everyone knows that the production went south. Like they really started to be pretty
labor problems,
pretty crappy motorcycles at that point. Yeah. So I think from maybe a guy who had got out of high school in the mid '70s or whatever had heard oh well, Harleys are they leak oil, the falls off. I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to spend my hard-earned cash on something that goes down the road and doesn't give me a hassle. Yeah. So in come the Japanese cruisers, even though maybe they're not as high performance or sounding like a race car like a CB750. Oh man, I get a V-twin that has some chrome. I hit the button and go, man. I don't need to mess around with anything falling off or engine castings breaking or whatever the hell was going on.
But that was
with
the
all
customer.
AMF
I think that was the customer that they were trying to line out. Must have been a long play because anybody who was who was buying the inline four machines, the more standard sporting models, they weren't going to I would say downgrade to a cruiser because it wouldn't offer the performance your definition that it would get. Anybody who was on a Harley didn't really give a hoot about performance, and it was like, well, I'm just going to keep buying the ones I've always bought because that's my bike.
Well, then in comes the Evo, where it was that's when the doctors and lawyers and all that stuff came in because you could finally have a Harley that was reliable as a Japanese bike. Sure. In the mid '80s at that point.
It was a fine engine.
But then when you look at so here's the other thing to consider. So up until recently, I mean, they've kept growing, and you've seen all these other manufacturers kind of jump on the bandwagon. Like I know you mentioned the other day, you brought the Ducati to mind, and I had never even known that Ducati tried to hand
weird cruiser.
Yeah. The Indiana, the Ducati Indiana, yeah.
But then you saw,
sweet.
But how many conversations have you and I had about the Triumph cruisers, right? When they came in with the Speedmaster, the America, the Thunderbird. I mean, they were great bikes, and
Answer to a question nobody ever asked.
They couldn't sell. They were quality. They were reliable. I mean, that 865 engine was bulletproof.
Yeah.
They looked great, and they just couldn't move. And then I think what you've really seen is you have to look at, Joe makes fun of me because I always bring it back to numbers, but cruisers continue to decline in sales. But I guess why? You look at, the cruiser segment is.
There's a billion reasons they could.
The cruiser segment is down like 12%.
Sure.
Whereas the rest of the segments, aside from touring, long haul touring is down like 9%. But when you look at and I have the numbers here somewhere, but like sport bikes are up 7.5%. Traditional, which is like naked sport bikes and like street twin like that, is up 6.1%. Dual sports, which includes adventure bikes, is up 11%.
You're boring me to tears.
But my point is like
and pie charts.
Yeah, but I think when you look at the numbers, like motorcycling in America is actually like the majority of the other segments is actually kind of on the rise, but cruisers are such a big component that are coming down.
Think about this one aspect of that though. Vehicles, cars, and everything have become more specialized. So it's like where there used to be tons of like just four-door sedans on the roads all the way up until
they're dead, man.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like think about the
SUV
Taurus
and
and stuff like
CUV
that.
killed them, yeah.
Everything is crossovers. Everything's SUVs. Everything's just like giant pickup
First
trucks.
time you saw a station wagon on the road.
Or like a little roadster or something like that, So like I think not just motorcycles, but everything has gone more specialized. So there really is no four-wheeled vehicle equal to a cruiser at this point. Like that would have to be just a straight hot rod with the engine hanging out, from the 30s or something. So I think maybe it's not the motorcycle in general that's suffering from that, but it's just like overall people's interest. Like because it's like, man, if you buy like a Jeep, it's like automatically you're that guy who goes camping on the weekend, that goes kayaking.
You gotta shave your head, you gotta get a calf tattoo, and you gotta ride around with the doors off.
But I'm saying, all I'm saying is I think maybe the focus is shifting. And maybe the focus, where cruisers have predominantly been like the number one style of motorcycle in America, all I'm saying is now maybe what we're seeing is that the motorcycle community in general is saying, there might be some other alternatives out there that I think could better serve my needs, and we're just seeing this shift into other bikes.
Sure, and the cruiser probably had a disproportionate share of the market anyway, part of that probably due to Harley-Davidson. But I think also, you're negating a fact that cruisers do still sell really well in this country.
They do.
And secondly, I think there's a lot of people, myself included, look, man, I'm not trying to take a trip to the moon. I just want to go out and get some ice cream. Like, I don't need a TFT dash, and I don't need
If that's the case, then why are we continually seeing manufacturers bring in these giant Luxo cruise? Like, look at what Yamaha did this year.
Yeah.
With the big Eluder, and they're like $25,000 bikes with all that gadgetry, and then not even close to the performance that a Harley-Davidson would give you. So my question is,
I think their performance of those would probably be pretty similar. You don't?
I'd have to look at the charts.
I
don't
Lance
think it is.
wrote them
Lance
for
wrote
us,
it for us, but I guess.
I'm sure it's
pie charts and bar
But
graphs.
why would you continue to push bikes into that market, knowing that this? I'm not saying
high profit margin. That's
what?
why high profit margin.
If you can sell them, who's walking into a Yamaha dealership and dropping
$25,000 bike? Yeah, you sell one of those things. There's some profit in there.
But what are they dropping them to sell? Like, how much are they really selling those bikes for?
Probably
They're not selling 25 grand.
So forget about what's actually happening. I think the reason you actually put that into the market is because it's a high margin motorcycle. That's what the manufacturers want to sell. You think Yamaha's going to make their nut selling XT250s all day? There's no profit.
I agree with that, but why not look at some of the segments that are actually profitable and kind of like shift your focus into that? Not saying to stop building cruisers,
sure,
but like, pick one or two, that's your cruiser for your line, stick with that, and if you want a cruiser, you're still serving that market, but then shift your efforts into something else.
This is kind of like a shop. I'll use RevZilla, for example. When we first started selling parts, we sold exhaust and we didn't have exhaust gaskets. Crazy, who's gonna buy that? Same thing, having the little $8 exhaust gasket helps you sell the $800 exhaust that's gonna go with it. It's the same thing here. In order to be a full line manufacturer, you gotta have a full line. I think that's also part of it too. You don't have to be the world's cruiser king, but I think if you want to claim to be a full line manufacturer, you do have to have some options.
I think another kind of byproduct of what a cruiser actually is, and maybe why Harley's been so successful all this time, is the fact, like, if we go back, I started thinking of the AMF era and all this stuff because I had a 70 Electroglide for a while I had restored, and when I was done restoring the bike after 2 years, it was a brand new 1970 FLH. It was a beautiful bike, awful motorcycle. Like, it leaked, it dragged the pegs, the brakes were terrible, the handling was weird.
Sure.
I mean, it looked great and sounded great and all those things. And I put my heart into that bike. And when I finally came to terms with the fact that it sucked to ride, in came the Tiger.
So it sucked to ride for you. I have a feeling I could take your 70 FLH out, load that thing up.
You can't. It's gone. You sold it.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Well, I rode it to Canada. I mean, I put big miles on
But I'm
it.
saying I could probably do the same ride as you on that bike, and I might feel differently about it. And Spurgeon might feel differently. But, he might hate it more than you did. I might love it more.
I would leave it at this for me, as we're kind of getting back to some of the original points that we started with. But I think that I enjoy riding a cruiser in a very specific way. I do. Like when I did the Road King across Texas, I really very much enjoyed that ride. 55 miles an hour cruising, and it was fun. But there's not enough versatility to get me to buy one, and that's my point. I do not hate them, but there's just not enough
The
versatility.
cool thing is
there's just
you
not enough
could
versatility
own
for
a
me.
lot of different kinds of motorcycles.
So I was just gonna say we have this talk. How often do we have this talk? You love an adventure bike because it's
do you have
it's
right
the
now?
Swiss, no. You love adventure
but
bikes because it's the
I think
Swiss Army of it's a Swiss Army knife of motorcycles.
Right.
And I don't disagree with you. I think that's actually correct.
Yeah, it's
I
cool.
think there's some people though who see a wide variety of jobs. And they say, well, I can have one tool that's going to handle all of them, then I only have to have one tool I carry around. Or they say, like, man, I'm going to do a good job in each of these, and I'm going to grab a couple different tools.
Yeah.
It's just a question of how you
But
look
I
at
guess
it.
even my old Bonneville T100, that's still my favorite bike. Like, I would rather have that bike as my.
Which I've never seen you ride.
Well, it's because I gave it to my dad because my dad crashed his bike, so he's been riding.
You're a
He's been
good
riding
kid.
my Bonnie.
You're a good kid.
Your dad crashed his bike, so then you gave him yours, so you crash your bike.
That's
He
what
hasn't
gets
crashed
it.
me. He hasn't
I
crashed
didn't
that
know
one yet.
crashing
Yeah.
bikes was a
Sorry about
hereditary trait.
There's an article about that on Common Tread. No, I guess that's your point, because I guess the point that I was going to try and make there was like, oh well, my Bonneville, I'd rather do everything. And what you're saying is that like, you're not looking for a do anything bike. You want to have a cruiser in the garage for that job.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have an ancient Harley in my garage if I didn't have a dirt bike
think
and a
of-
flat
think
track
about
bike
this.
and something standard or.
You and I like old weird, and we know that they're not the greatest things. For whatever
They are the
reason,
greatest
we
things.
are.
You guys are missing. Like, I have old bikes in the garage. They're just Japanese.
And they don't run. You have them there for decoration.
How often do your bikes run? I mean, come on.
All my
I've
old
been to your
stuff runs
garage.
great.
There's always one not running.
So
That's not true.
what I think the Japanese had kind of maybe missed, or even Triumph or Ducati or whatever, or any other company who tried to kind of like blatantly copy. You have the Shadow, the Intruder, the Marauder. Even the names are like, obviously I'm copying the Harley. You know what I mean? But when I think about like I had a Honda Shadow, a mid '80s Honda Shadow in the late '90s that I got in trade for a coffee table.
Good deal.
But the damn thing was too perfect. It was kind of boring. So boring that I actually fell asleep riding it to Montauk one night on the Long Island Expressway. And I
don't know if you can blame that on the motorcycle.
Well, it's just that the old Triumphs and the old Harleys are rattling and vibrating, and things are falling off, and hot oil's hitting in your eyes and everything like that. That keeps you awake. But the Honda Shadow
my post
Was a better bike than your 70 FLH.
was a way better motorcycle.
So I think you're touching on something important right now. What we as humans, we have a tendency.
Perfect.
Exactly. We have a tendency to anthropomorphize things, right? The more we use something, especially the more important it is to us, the more we tend to lend it specific characteristics. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, "Oh yeah, she's doing this, she's doing that," talking about their bike? Maybe it's because we see ourselves in them. I'm not sure. But when you consider that, I think we like machines to have some flaws. I think it makes them seem more human.
Has more
oddly
character, yeah.
Oddly enough, you used to use the word. I think everybody says either character or soul.
Right.
And what they're talking about is this foible that this bike has that I find quirky and doesn't make me want to sell this bike. It is Cindy Crawford's mole. That's what we're talking about right now. It's the thing that makes your bike feel like yours. But it also kind of isn't. It's not really a strong point. Why are you smiling? I feel like you're loaded for bear. You're
No.
gonna come after
I
me
keep
right
thinking
now.
about how when I mentioned giving the Bonnie to my dad, and I keep thinking about how he calls me this thing doesn't run right. You have to it doesn't choke right and this and that. I'm like, no, you just have to do it like this. He's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, yeah, but I know the starting sequence for my bike, right? I know how to start it.
What
how
year
to
is
run
this
it.
bike?
Is it? Yeah. Is it real?
It's an
Is the
05.
starting sequence real bad on this electric start bike?
No, but the way that the fueling is set up with the jets and the pipes and everything, it doesn't like to be fully choked, and there's something.
Let me hear the starting
you.
sequence of of your shovel.
Oh, I don't want to talk about that. We don't have time. We don't have that kind of time.
No, all I'm saying is, like,
choke
to your point, like, I get it, right? Like, there's something that's cool about it just being a little bit quirky. You know, you can't go out and just
That's
thumb it
why
the
I have
traditional
so
way.
many
Like, I
old
get it.
Triumphs. It's like they all have so much character and so much soul, but sometimes you don't feel like that. You just want to go to work. You don't want to have to dick around with the choke or, kicking it this way or that way.
Sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes what
lot of
makes
the
it a little
time you do,
harder
yeah.
makes it a little bit better. So,
But now you guys are talking about older bikes. Like, you're not talking about like
No, I'm
a brand new Harley Davidson off the showroom floor. Like, I can go out there and thumb the starter on the street glide and it fires
sure,
right
but they're
up.
weird. Like even a new Harley, like it's gonna fart out the air cleaner every now and then. It's gonna like.
Well, think about-
even new bikes do weird stuff.
Think about how the transition from the twin cam to the Milwaukee 8, the twin cam was too refined, and people were complaining that the thing was too damn smooth. So now the Milwaukee 8 has an imbalancer built into it.
Balancer.
So
It's a
so
balancer.
weird to me.
It just doesn't balance everything.
Well, they make it so it vibrates more at idle just for that Harley
No,
feel.
it can't be weird to you because you just explained the starting sequence on your Triumph. It's not weird to you at all.
No, but you're taking an engine and you're building in.
Yeah, better isn't better. Exactly, you're building in something weird. Yes, exactly. That's the point. I guess that's what I'm
I
saying.
think that's what a lot of the import cruisers suffer from, is that they're too refined, they're too perfect.
Yeah, I completely agree.
To the point where they could be boring.
I agree with you. I think about like when I went from the Tiger to the KTM, and the thing that I liked about it most was like the Tiger was so smooth, and like that KTM, you get on and you start it up, and like it just like
It feels nasty.
it feels
Coming
nasty.
off the Tiger and riding
You ride the 1090, it feels like it wants to rip your throat out. So yeah, I get it.
So it makes you feel a certain way.
gives you the feels.
All right, I get it.
It performs
you win.
emotionally.
You win.
I
get
do
it.
win.
There's
I
an
win.
emotional performance. I think if I had the money, I would love to have a Road King in the garage. If I could afford to have like
Wait a minute, what about that video where you told us how great your credit was?
I have great credit, but like I have great credit for a reason because
This
I'm
is
not
the
really
American
blowing
way,
it down
baby.
the road.
Oh man.
But no, so I guess for me, like I do. I see if I could have like that one extra bike in the garage to just take out on a Sunday afternoon, I could see.
All right, so let's sum this up for Spurgeon. I hate cruisers because I'm broke. I think that's what that's.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
I
Now,
would like to
I'm
have
trying. I'm
something
trying to be
ridiculous.
nice, and I'm trying to come back around and say that I do agree. I do agree with a lot of the points that you guys have made.
I don't have any cruisers
Hang
in my
on, Joe says he
stable.
wants something ridiculous. You have to be quiet because whenever he says that, there's usually a good plan behind it.
No, I mean I don't have any cruisers in my stable right now. I have a lot of varied machines at this point, but just that whole like Ed Roth, like George Barris, like Valkyrie, Rocket 3, like totally bananas.
Just over the top, for over the top
An
sake.
over the top production machine that sounds ridiculous and looks ridiculous, like that is just rad. That's such a cool thing that exists.
You know, we haven't even gotten into choppers yet. We're going to have to save that for another time, though. That's going to wrap this one up. Spurgy, Joe Zito, and this gasshole, I'm Lemmy, and we are all out of here.